Graduated from high school in 1965.
So how was that?
I grew up in Yuba City, California, in the middle of the Central Valley, in 100 and plus temperatures in the summertime, with no air conditioning. My father was a mailman, and I went on his route many a time. He drove up into the mother lode country, and my mom worked in the canneries all the time in the summertime, and she babysat for a lot of other families. So what I remember about growing up is I remember that my parents were never there, because my mother was always at someone else's house and my father was always on the mail route. And what I remembered is that my sister basically raised my brother, because my mother was always at someone else's house raising someone else's children. And so I was pretty much left on my own. My sister took my brother, and I pretty much, from the time I was 6 on, I just pretty much stayed at home.
What would you do?
I sort of stayed in the yard because I was told to, and rode my bike and played with the neighbor kids, you know, that sort of thing. But what I remember the most, when I was about 7, and it was about first or second grade probably, I discovered the farm labor camp at the end of the street. About, maybe 2.5 blocks, 3 blocks down from my house was a farm labor camp. And in those days, everybody came, mom and dad and grandma and grandpa, aunts and uncles. And so I would sneak down there while my parents were gone and just stand and watch. Because it was so fascinating to me that there were these huge families and everybody was there and the kids were playing, and of course everybody was speaking Spanish, and I didn't understand Spanish at the time, but I just loved the atmosphere, and I just stood around. I can remember just standing around. Nobody really even paid any attention to me. And then gradually they started talking to me in Spanish, and so that's how come I fell in love with the Spanish language, because I fell in love with the Spanish immigrant families that came there. And so I just, that's what I remember most about growing up, with those incredible families, and had a park at the end of the street, used to go to the park, and I used to babysit the kids down the end of the street who were also Spanish speaking. And so it was just something that I really, really enjoyed. My parents really didn't know any of this. They were gone all the time, and really this didn't appreciate other cultures and the diversity in the world. We had Indian people on our block, we had black people, we had Hispanic people, and my parents just all sort of just pretended they weren't there. And so when they found out that I was down at the farm labor camp, they were a little bit upset with me, but I still continued to go. When I entered high school, I decided that I was going to take Spanish because I loved the language, I loved everything about it. And I was madly in love with my high school Spanish teacher, who was redheaded and from Madrid. So he did not speak Mexican Spanish. He spoke Spanish from Castellon, from the middle of Spain. He was born in Madrid. So anyway, I just really thought he was amazing. And he sort of arranged it so that a good friend of mine that I've had since 4th grade, who was also in Spanish, could go to Mexico. So when I was 16, we traveled on a bus all the way from Yuba City, California to El Paso, Texas. I'll never forget how hot it was. And then we went down, straight down from El Paso, Texas. We went into the state of Chihuahua, and we stayed in a town called Torreon. It was just me and my friend Luana, who's also a Spanish teacher, and 2 other girls from Omaha, Nebraska. And the 4 of us stayed in this house for 3 months. I was working in the peach cannery by that time, and I was, at 14, I started picking prunes up off the ground, and, you know, I was in Yuba City, so you worked in the canneries, you worked in the fields, you know. I could make more money in the fields than I could make anywhere else doing anything else. So that's what I did. And but that particular summer, when I decided to go, my parents were very adamant that I shouldn't be going, that it was a waste of time. But I went, and I was gone for all 3 months, and I fell madly in love again with the culture. Chihuahua is not a very, you know, it's a big state, but it's broad and wide, and Torreon was not a very big town, and I lived with an incredible family that were just opened their homes and their hearts up to us, and had a Mexican boyfriend. That'll increase your Spanish real quick. His name was Cha-Cha. That's all anybody called him. I was 16 and he was 22. So that was quite an experience, to say the least. And I was chubby. I've always been chubby. I was always the chubby girl in high school, and so I was hefty all my growing up time, but he didn't seem to mind, which was very sweet, because I never had a boyfriend before I was 16. So that was very nice, and I was there all 3 months, and did not want to come home at all. And so when I came back, I was going to be a senior in high school, and so I decided that no matter what, I was going to college. So once again, my parents were not real supportive of that idea, because they thought that again was a waste of money. They didn't value education that much. They graduated from high school, and they thought that was good enough, and that should be good enough. I always remember my mother saying to me, just be a telephone operator like your sister. Because that's what my sister did. She worked for, the telephone company, and that's what she did. And she was married, and starting her family and all those things. And she was very, she had a very nice husband, and had a nice little house across the street from the high school where I attended. And my mother used to say that to me, just be a telephone operator. Well, I had a dear friend, the same one from 4th grade, whose parents did encourage their daughter to go to college, and so they were my encouragement. And I did all the paperwork. I did all the financial aid. Of course, it's so cheap then. I mean, it's nothing compared to what it is to now, And I went to school. I went to Chico State, which wasn't that far, just 50 miles away. And so I felt like I was, and I got myself a place to stay in the dorm, and did all the things I needed to do. And my freshman year at Chico State, I lived in a home setting with about 20 other girls, and it was really wonderful, very close-knit group of people, again with the same girl from 4th grade, Luana, and she and I were roommates, and we had a great time. And I enjoyed Chico State immensely, pioneer days and all that stuff. But once again, I declared Spanish as my major. And right away, I found out that there was an international program. And I said, okay, this is for me. This is what I'm doing. I'm going to Spain my junior year. I don't care what happens. So my freshman year, I lived in this dorm-like setting, which is more like a home. And then my sophomore year, I applied to be a resident assistant. So I was an RA in the dorm in Lassen Hall at California State University, Chico. That was really an eye-opener for me, because I was younger than most of the girls on my floor. And in those days, we had hours. I mean, the kids all had to be in at 11 o'clock. No men in the rooms, no booze, no. And it was my job to make sure that none of those things took place. And of course, they all took place. Every one of them took place. And I always remember that seven of my 41 girls got pregnant that year. 7. And it was like, oh my gosh, this was 1966, 67. So that was really, and the thing that was most interesting to me was that every single one of those girls was affected differently by the same situation. And it was so interesting to see how each one, based on what was going on in their lives, and who the guy was, and who mom was, and all that stuff, everybody had different ideas of how to deal with that situation. So it was a very, very good life lesson for me. One girl decided that she would have an abortion, and so she took care of that on her own. I tried to intervene as much as I could, because I felt it was my place to do so, and I told other people, which they didn't want to have happen. So I got myself in kind of sticky situations in a couple of things, but I really felt that it was my place, to kind of say something. And 3 of the girls married and left school and I presume had the babies. I don't really know what happened with those people or not, but I'm presuming that they kept the children. And then, so that was 4 of them, of the 7, and then the other 3 just sort of disappeared. I mean, they left campus, they were gone. I don't know, but none of them stayed on campus. None of them stayed in school. They all left. All 7 of them left. And this was over the course of the year, of course. And I remember thinking back, because when I was in high school, when I was 15, my sophomore year in high school, a girl got pregnant. And the thing that was most interesting at that time was she married her boyfriend and she stayed in school and she had her baby, which of course in those days was quite unknown, really. And but everybody watched her get pregnant. Everybody, well, not watched her get pregnant, but I mean everybody watched her grow as she got more and more pregnant, you know. And she brought the baby to school the following year, and she finished up her senior year. And so I thought, well, you know, that's pretty amazing. And I think that experience of seeing that, you know, it just sort of depends on the person and the situation. There's no saying this is a good thing or a bad thing. That person has to make that choice. And so, you know, it was just a very good life lesson for me, and something that because I was raised Catholic. So I was raised by a very Catholic mother with very Catholic ideas about, you know, what's going to happen to you if you do this or that, or, you know, and so very judgmental, lots of fear base, you know, lots of things that, you know, and so going through all of that really opened my eyes up. And I really was able to see that, you know, there's just not one answer. There just isn't to anything. So I went off to Spain. My junior year in college, I left as soon as school was out. I left in middle of June so that I could travel around. I had a UL pass. I basically, the deal that I made with my parents was that since I was a resident assistant that year and I wasn't asking for any help with my housing because my housing was paid for and I basically had everything else paid for, that would they give me $1,000, which was basically what my housing would have cost to go to Spain. And they agreed very reluctantly. I will remember we went to San Francisco State University and we stayed in a dorm room, my mother and I, the night before we left. And she just bawled and carried on and was just, how can you do this? And it's halfway around the world. And she was just beside herself. You know, she was just not happy about it at all. And I, of course, was just like a brat. And I just said, you know, I really don't care. I'm going. I did this, you know, and I was really pretty awful about it. I really was. But I took off, and it was just, I was there all year long. I mean, I was there. I didn't come home until like 5 days before my senior year in college, and I went my entire junior year. And I loved every absolute thing about it. And I traveled, and I hitchhiked, and I did everything you can think of doing. This coming birthday will be 40 years since I went to Spain. And, you know, like I get a URL pass and we'd take the train to a destination and then just ride it back so we wouldn't have to pay for a hotel or a hostel or a pension. I mean, we had incredible ways of getting around so we could do it cheap. And then, of course, we'd stay with each other. So, you know, you're living in Granada, we'll all come to Granada and stay with you. And you come to Madrid and stay with me, and you know, so we were very, and of course, in those days, hitchhiking was okay. I wouldn't encourage anybody to do that today. Probably, I know kids do, but you know, and I got myself in a couple of situations where it was a little, you know, iffy, and I think about, you know, coulda, shoulda, woulda, probably wouldn't do it today, but you know, I'm sure my kids have done the same things, you know.
So what, they probably want to hear about that.
Well, it's just, you know, like my dear friend Elliot and I ended up hitchhiking in the up above Barcelona. But she was French, and even though she was living in America, and we hitchhiked up to Barcelona and then started going up into France. And we ended up in a farmhouse in the middle of the night with 5 people, none of whom we knew. And it was very sketcy because we had no idea where we were. We had no idea who these people were, you know, and lots of booze, you know. It was just a little on the iffy side, and we really were very happy we were there together and nothing happened and all, but it was just, you know, it's just one of those situations where you just don't have very good feelings about it. And we got up very early the next morning and just left and went back down to the road and hitchhiked out and left the 5 people there. That we just, you know, it was a gut thing. We just felt it was not the place to be. And, you know, thank goodness I think they were all drinking enough that, you know, they were not going to be a problem. But we just didn't feel good. And a couple of other times, you know, things like that, things I did. Well, in those days, you don't wear pants in Spain. Well, here I am again. I'm not this lithe thing, never have been this lithe thing. And I will never forget, I bought this corduroy outfit. And oh, I have pictures of me in it today. And oh my word, talk about, you know, because in those days they had the piropo, which is just, they would come right up to your face, literally, and say whatever their little heart happened to think. And it could be bad, it could be good, it could be, you know, and most of the time, I didn't necessarily understand it because it was slang or something, but when I did understand it, generally it was not very nice. And so, you know, you learn sort of to be a little bit less out there. I also taught a little girl 3 times a week. I took the subway in Madrid, and I will never forget this. Long ways. I had to ride the subway. I had to change the subway twice. The metro, it was called in Spain, it's called the metro. And I'll never forget this. I climbed on like I always do. You don't look at people, you know, you keep your eyes down and you don't look very much up at people. And I wasn't, and I was just sort of standing by the door, and the metro stopped, and in came a young man. You know, I was not getting off. I was just standing right around the corner, and he walked in, and he saw me, and he went and he walked to the other side and stayed there. And I didn't really look at him that closely, but I just didn't feel good. Well, the next stop, he got up close to the door and got ready to get out. And as he got out, he swung his hand at me like this right in front of me, and swung his hand like that. I thought he was going to hit me, but no, what he did is he slapped the window beside me and scared me tremendously. I mean, I just was terrified. But then he swept out the door, and the door closed, and he was gone. And I turned around and looked, just, you know, and on the window he had written, it said in "Que vayan los Yankees," that Yankees go home. Que vayan los Yankees. And so, you know, I mean, I stuck out like a sore thumb. I mean, look at me. You know, I'm in Spain in 1967. I did not blend in with anybody. So and of course, you know, we're in Vietnam at that time. So I mean, there's all kinds of animosity towards Americans, and there's, you know, lots of things going back on at the colleges. And I mean, 67 to 68 was the year that I was there. So the world was just in turmoil, and Spain was also in turmoil. And we were taken off the campus of the University of Madrid more than once because they had big trucks driving around with yellow paint, and they would just spray yellow paint. And if you got yellow paint on you, you went to jail. Questions were not asked. And so, and they would just put you in jail, and then they interrogate you, and the likelihood of you getting out was great. But at the same time, the international programs didn't want us on campus. So they'd take us off and put us in different buildings and different things. And, you know, and the military police was very prevalent. But at the time, I didn't think much about it. I mean, I was 21 years old, and I just thought, you know, it was kind of exciting and kind of interesting, and our professors were incredible, and the places we went and the things we did, and I mean, I was just like at the height of wonderfulness. There was a military base there, so there were a lot of American guys around when they were all in uniforms, and, you know, we'd go out to the bars, and, you know, the Spaniards, they were very difficult. The Spanish men were very hard to, and again, I wasn't this lithe little thing, but I did date a few Spaniards, but I was really happy to have all these American guys around, and they were happy to have American girls around, and we just went out in groups all the time, and went here, and I mean, it was a fabulous experience. Everything about it. And it really made me not really want to come home, because I really felt that we were in Nam and we were doing all these horrible things and everybody was talking about us, and it was hard. It was a very difficult time, and yet I was 21. I thought, wow, look where I am, look what I'm doing, And so it was a fabulous year, and I fell in love with Spain, and I've been in love with Spain all of my life. Then
Were you never afraid
no.
as a 22-year-old, to take high school kids to the
No,
you're fearless.
I am fearless. I really honestly don't look at things that way, I guess. I really don't know, because I sort of just barge right on through without giving a lot of thought to things sometimes, because I look back on some of the things I've done and I'm going like, did you think about that? Did it even cross your mind? Because I've done some pretty, like I say, I was married to somebody for 20 years and really didn't know who this person was, and we traveled and did a lot of wonderful things, went a lot of wonderful places, had a lot of wonderful experiences. But I look back on it now and I go, I would get in the car with my children and not even know where we were going. Now that's pretty crazy. And like I say, my kids lived in 5 different states and 34 different houses, and it was crazy. I always said we had to buy a house. Well, we'd buy a house eventually, but it never made us stay. So, I look back on some of the things I did and I go, what were you thinking? But I have, beautiful children. I have had a beautiful life. I have everything, that anybody could.
You have 2 kids.
Yeah, and so I married in 1970. I 69 was my first teaching job. I always have to tell this. In 1969, I got my first teaching job at Gridley High School teaching Spanish, and I signed a contract for $6,900 for the entire year at Gridley High School. And that very day that I signed the contract, I went out and I bought a $3,600 gold Camaro. So, with 5 on the floor, I spent 50% of my salary on. Of course, it was all on loan. But I did it on the very day that I within 24 hours of my $6,900 salary, I had bought a $3,600 70 Camaro, which is right up there. Which I love that car. And then I got my job in Gridley, and started driving back and forth between Gridley and Chico, and got a speeding ticket. I'll never forget this either. The kids were so creative, my high school kids, because of course I was 22, and they were running me ragged. Literally. I was, oh my God, it was a terrible. My first year was they just knew me. They knew they could get past me. Well, in the little Gridley newspaper, they print everything. It's just a little, gossip thing. So some very creative child, who I'll never know who it was, went through the paper, because I did get it, was printed up, stopped for speeding, the time and the place and everything, and fined, I don't remember what it was, whatever amount of money it was, and it was in the thing, so it said my maiden name and all. Well, some darling child cut them all out and put them all together. So it turned out that I was drunk driving, that I'd hit a cow, that I had done all this stuff, because it had to take them a really long time to put that all together. And then they blew it up even, and they posted it on the principal's door. And so I go to school Monday morning, and of course everybody's looking at me, teachers and everybody, and the principal calls me in, and I'm going, what, So anyway, that was one of the highlights of teaching at Gridley High School. I will never forget that, and the kids, of course, never let me forget it either. So anyway, I went back to school, and that's where I met my husband. My ex was a Vietnam vet, back from Vietnam, and back to school, getting his teaching credential. And I had a boyfriend that was probably the love of my life, and when I came back my senior year, but he was really into the drug scene, and so I was always around drugs. I never did drugs, but I was always there because he was always there, and I just sort of became a go for it for him, and it was awful. And I don't know why I did it, but as again, you question yourself. But anyway, he killed himself on drugs. I mean, he had an overdose and he died, and that was, you know, I was completely done with men. I decided I was never getting married. I didn't want anything to do with any of that. And I was actually, when I met my ex-husband, I was 24, and I was seriously looking into adoption, because I didn't think I ever wanted to get married, because I'd had a couple of boyfriends before, and it just had always just seemed to be just ridiculous. And so I was looking into private adoption, you know, at 24 and 19, it was 1974. And I met.
So you knew you wanted to have kids.
Oh, I wanted to have
before you
kids.
wanted to have a husband.
Oh, absolutely. The husband part just didn't click with me at all.
So what about having kids?
Oh, I just had to have kids. I had grown up with all those little kids around me all the time. I had babysat all my life. I had always had children around me, always. And I wanted to have my own kids. It was the most important thing to me, and I wanted to have them before I was 30. And I was 24, so I thought, oh my God, you know, and of course 24 was old then. You were already old if you weren't married and didn't have a child on the way already. You were already old at 24. And I saw nothing on the horizon that was going to bring me a baby. And so it was Christmas time, and I was living in a house with a bunch of other people that were working. We were no longer college kids. And my ex-husband was dating a woman in my house. And I'll never forget it. So I was sicker than a dog, and I stayed home from Gridley High School that day. And he, who I'd met a couple of times before, just a person, I mean, just a guy that came around the house, was dating Betty. I don't remember Betty, but I remember the name. Anyway, he was there at the house, and we got to talking and started talking and everything. He was in a fraternity, and we just, you know, just sort of hit it off, just yakety stuff. And at Christmas time, he invited me to go Christmas caroling with his fraternity. And so one thing just sort of led to another, and all he talked about was having kids. It's all he ever talked about. He wanted 6 kids. And so I said, well, this is the person, this is the one I'm going to marry. And so anyway, it just sort of happened that he wanted kids and I wanted kids. I don't know. I think I loved him, maybe. I don't know if he ever, I think what he saw in me is a girl with a Camaro. I really do think so. Because I really think that's exactly what he saw, was a girl with a Camaro and a good job, had a good job. I could afford, you know, to live in a nice place. You know, I had roommates, but you know, I was doing well. I was doing really well for 24. I had no, you know, no debt, and I had a good job and a good car. And I honestly think that's what he saw. But I saw a person that just loved to go. He wanted to travel, he wanted to go places, and he wanted kids. And so I married him in, June of 1974. We'd known each other for less than a year, and I decided, I'll never forget this, I decided that we should wait for the babies for a little bit. So I went on birth control. I'll never forget it. Our honeymoon night, I forgot them. So I forgot the birth control pills. We had to go all the way back to get them because I was so sure that we were going to do this on my timeline. It's so silly. So anyway, I took them for a while, and then I just said, yeah, it's time for us, you know, to have our children. So of course we start trying, and no babies, and no babies, and no babies. And we're living, at this point in time, we've left Chico, and we live in Longview, Washington, where he'd got a job teaching. And we had gone up to Montana, and the whole time we were in Montana, he was getting his master's degree, and I was trying to get pregnant. That was all I was doing. I should have gotten a master's degree. And I did get a master's degree. It just says instead of because I did 97% of the work on that master's degree. I mean, he probably wouldn't agree with that, but it's so I substitute taught, and I tried to get pregnant. And we saw every kind of doctor under the sun. He finally got a job, went to Longview, Washington, and still trying to get pregnant. And I went up to a fertility clinic in Portland, Oregon, and worked with them, and you took pills and took ovulation and all that stuff that you do. Read every kind of book under the sun, and no babies, and no babies, and no, not anything, no miscarriage, nothing. And so anyway, we were with Dr. Thomas, and he said, you know what, there is the daughter of one of my nurses who's pregnant, and she's going to give her baby up for adoption. Do you want the baby? This is December. We're going home for Christmas. And we say, absolutely, positively, no doubt about it. We're in line. And, you know, we've known so many people who've signed up for adoption and had been on waiting lists for years. And, you know, we hadn't really done that sort of thing yet. We were still thinking that we will be able to have a child. And so anyway, we jump on it. We say, absolutely. And they go, well, the baby's due March 18th. And we go, well, that's fine. So from December to March, we're going to be parents. And so, but we don't tell a soul. We do not tell a soul because we just don't want anybody to nix this thing at all. So anyway, we wait, and the last, like the last month of her pregnancy, she would go and visit the doctor. She was a nurse's daughter, and he'd call us immediately and say, this is what she's saying, that's how she is. And so we felt very much a part of this whole process. It never met her. I knew her name as well as I know, you know, anybody's name. I knew the father's name. I knew everything because we were going to pay all the hospital bills. That's all the deal was. And of course, we're going to make it legal and so forth. So anyway, on March 30th, we had a baby boy and brought him home on April Fool's Day. I always give him a bad time about that. That's JJ. Brought him home on April Fool's Day to our house in Longview, Washington, a lovely home. Again, we hadn't told anybody. So that day, we spent cutting out great big blue letters about this big, and we plastered them across the front of our window. We have a new baby boy. And of course, Longview Community College, where my husband was teaching, they had got wind of it, and they came out and took a picture of it and put it on the front page of the newspaper with Jim holding the new boy and me beside him, and it was such a sweet thing. And so anyway, we were thrilled to death, and of course we got on the phone and told everybody, and we were just delighted. We had a new baby boy, and we were just thrilled to death. And all this time when you're trying to get pregnant, you always think you're pregnant, but you never are, and you go. So I'll never forget it. I went to Planned Parenthood because I didn't want to go to the doctor and have the doctor tell me again for the umpteenth time that I wasn't pregnant. So I went to Planned Parenthood all by myself with my brand new baby boy, was told that I was pregnant. And I was like, whoa, you know, it was such an exciting day. And of course, a lot of people who go to Planned Parenthood don't want to hear they're pregnant. You know, that's why they went to Planned Parenthood. So here I am with a brand new baby boy, 3 weeks old, and I find out I'm pregnant. So of course, I'm just thrilled beyond words. So we just called everybody, not a week before, and told everybody we had a baby boy. Now we waited a little bit longer, of course, because we wanted to make sure, and told everybody that I was pregnant. Everybody goes, well, of course, you know, you're such a casebook, you know, story. And but anyway, so my little girl was born 8 months later. She was born just before Thanksgiving. By that point in time, my wandering husband had lost a job. This is the first job he lost. I don't know if he really lost the job. I'll never know these stories. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he just wanted to move again. But we moved. And I was 7 months pregnant. And we had a house full of big oak furniture and a beautiful home. We had everything. I mean, it was... I've had everything. I've had everything any woman could ever want. I've had it. And anyway, I'm 7 months pregnant and I'm carrying a new baby boy. And my ex decides to move. So I don't even blink. I don't even do anything. I just, okay, where are we going? And we moved to Wenatchee, Washington. And he got a job at Wenatchee Community College. And, you know, but he always taught community college most of the time. And we settled in a darling little house and bought a house. And Karen was born, brought home to a big farmhouse, but freezing cold in the dead of winter. She was born at Thanksgiving, and all of Jim's family came. And here, it was awful. Snow up to our waist, just tons and tons of snow and cold. So snowy and so cold that Jim's brother and sister could not even go skiing. So there's everybody sitting around looking at my stomach going, well, you know, went all the way through Thanksgiving and still no Karen. She finally came like 3 days after Thanksgiving And of course, she's my Thanksgiving baby. I mean, she's just the sweetest gift in the whole world. And the next thing I know, my husband started a business, and the next thing I know, that's not going anywhere, and we're moving to Moscow, Idaho. So off we go to Moscow, Idaho. My kids are like 2 and 3. My dream is to stay home and be a mom. It's what I want to do. I want to stay home. I want to be a mom. But it doesn't come true because we moved to Moscow, Idaho, and one of my dear friends still today is a colleague of my husband, my ex-husband, Jim Gowdy, and his wife. And we became very good friends, very close friends. And she had 2 little boys, basically the same age as my little boy and little girl. And so I went off to work. I went to Washington State University and went to work. But anyway, we stayed there until the kids were about in 3rd or 4th grade. And then the wanderlust hit my husband again, or I don't know. He was working at the University of Idaho at that point in time as an accountant. And I don't know what happened. I never paid attention, I guess. I don't know. I was raising kids. And so anyway, we ended up in Tucson, Arizona. First, we went from the top of the United States, where it's freezing cold. We're about 200 miles from the Canadian border, to about 100 miles from the Mexican border, where it's blazing hot. And I just go along like it's nothing. I mean, I'm insane sometimes. I look back on it. He leaves in February. He leaves me with 2 young kids in the dead of winter and just takes off and moves to Tucson. And I just sort of, get everything together and do it all and get us there. And he comes back and helps drive the truck. But I mean, it's so amazing. I look back on it now and I go, unbelievable.
Well, do you think for that time, women were doing that?
Oh, God, yes.
Just like it was sort of status quo
Yeah,
for
it just-
everybody,
yeah.
the husband made these decisions?
That's right. That was it. And I can honestly tell you that it never occurred to me to say no. Even though every time we went somewhere, we bought a house, because I insisted that we buy a house. And I'll tell you, twice in Moscow, he bought a house without even telling me. We get to Tucson, Arizona, he had bought a house, had not told me. I mean, those things are just, that's unforgivable when I think back on it now. It's really unforgivable. But again, like you say, it's just sort of this is the person I chose. This is the person I'm staying with. This is.
Did you like the houses he bought?
That's irrelevant. It's totally irrelevant, because I didn't have a choice. I mean, I moved into them. I lived in them. I did what I did, but I really didn't care about the house one way or the other. As long as the 4 of us were together, we're all doing what we're supposed to be doing, and I took care of the house, and he went to work and played golf. And I look back on it now and I'm just like, what? Jim was such a wonderful dad. And then one day he just decided not to be a dad. I don't know. He's disappeared. I don't know. I'll never know the whole story. I have a rendition. My children have a rendition. He's gone. He's just gone.
You don't know where he is.
Well, I think that, yeah. And they've tried real hard in the last 10 years to have a relationship with him, but it's obvious that he's not interested. He's not interested in having a relationship with him. It's his loss. I do feel sad because, it's sad. It's everybody's loss, I know so many people who've figured that out, how to do that, but he's never, the kids tried. They really, really tried. They tried really hard to have a relationship with him, but it's been a good 10 years, I think. And finally, I just said, this is it. I'm done. So in 94, it took me 4 years. In 1994, I finally divorced him. And come to find out, he hadn't paid income taxes and hadn't done a ton of things. He's an accountant for years. See, I never paid any attention to any of this. Nothing. I never wrote a check. I never signed signed anything except houses. We bought all these houses. We'd done all this stuff. I'd done all these things through all these years, and he had a trail behind him.
You have 1 minute left.
As long as you could see.
Sorry
So that's fine.
But I just, you're an independent woman suddenly, and having to take care of this and 2 kids. Do you have any closing thoughts?
Just that, I've done it all. I've seen everything. I've been everywhere. I've had everything, but I ain't done. I got lots and lots of loving. 3 more weeks to go. 3 more weeks, 3 more years of school, and then you're not going to see me if I have a chance to get out of here.
Where are you going to go?
Everywhere, you name it. If I can figure out a way to get there, I really want to see New Zealand and Australia. Those are 2 high on my list. I want to see more of Canada. I've never been to the East Coast. I only to New York twice, which really doesn't count. I haven't seen the East Coast. So I want to go, you know. Wouldn't it be nice if? Wouldn't it be nice if? That's my new mantra. Wouldn't it be nice if? And I'm going to figure out some way to do that. So I'm a talker. See, I talk too much.
No, we talked wonderful. Wish we had more time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So anyway, that's it.
That was great.
I told a whole lot more than I probably should have.
Oh no.
You don't think
They'll
so?
appreciate.
Yeah.
They'll really
Yeah, you think so? Yeah. Yeah, I'm very fortunate. I'm very, very fortunate. Very fortunate lady. You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. Oh, take me off. Take me off.